Hello, hello, hello. It's like my little nod to Matthew McConaughey getting started here. Sorry, I don't have copyrights on that. But to get things started today, we have an interesting topic.
Very interesting.
Really borderline criminal.
Business topic.
And we're doing a little bit of what may come across as a little bit of a whistleblower type of situation here. And kind of, unfortunate. It's caused.
So it's devastating. Actually, it's really devastating.
It's caused some harm.
Lots of damage.
Yeah,
heartache.
A lot of people have suffered, been suffering.
Tortured.
That's been happening. Tortured souls.
We've done a lot of talking about this and a lot of investigative reporting. We've collected piles and piles of data, and we think we know
We've
what's
come
going
to
on
a
here.
conclusion.
We
might have solved the crime in terms of the cause. Who is to blame, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Dun,
now
dun, dun.
with that dramatic introduction, we will share the topic. The topic for today on this video is who is to blame for the disaster that is the job market today.
We figured it out. I think we know.
We figured it out.
We're going to share it. But the end result of all of our compiling of data and investigating and just like living and watching the torture and being tortured ourselves over and over and over again, the answer is, who's to blame? Recruiting.
Like, as a whole, when you look at the three traditional methodologies of recruiting, which is in-house corporate, contract recruiters, and then staffing agency or any type of outsourcing, we have come to a conclusion based on 2 years of data collection that without a question and without a doubt, the blame falls on recruiting. And
most of you know that we own a recruiting services company, so this is hard for us to say, but we can't lie.
Yeah. So let me give you a little bit of background here and help you understand how we've arrived at this conclusion and solved this mystery. It really starts with an acknowledgement of like when we say the job market's been a disaster, like what does that mean? And I think typically most people look at the job market from one view or the other. You've either been a job seeker looking for a job in the job market at some point in time in the last 5 to 7 years, or you've been on the other side of it as an employer looking to hire people in the last 5 to 7 years. And I'm kind of carving out that time because nothing was like a switch that was flipped, even though you could potentially point to COVID. But I really think that COVID and the impacts of COVID on the job market was only a contributing factor. I don't think that there was like just a flip of a switch and this was the outcome. This is something that's been evolving or devolving, should I say, over time. And it's created where we are today, which is hearing a lot of feedback from job seekers and from employers making the same like complaint and frustration, but from their experiences and perspectives. So from the job seeker perspective, the consistent feedback and frustrations that we've had shared with us or experienced ourselves was, what's going on? Why am I not getting a response to my application? I'm applying to jobs that I'm highly qualified for. Why am I not getting a response? Or let's say they get a response to their application, but what they're getting is an AI type of response to their application, whether it's an instant rejection, whether it's a weird, are you interested? Well, yeah, I'm interested. I applied to the job. Why wouldn't I be interested in the job? So a lot of email spamming, basically, that's automated through applicant tracking systems and things of that nature through the job boards like Indeed and ZipRecruiter and LinkedIn and what have you. And then nothing. Then they get ghosted, right? Then let's say for the few folks who actually make it to either like a recruiter phone screen or make it to a first round interview, and then they said they're getting ghosted. bottom line is that the job seeker experience, it sounds to me, based on, I'm not talking about a couple people that we've had conversations with, I'm talking about hundreds over the course of the last 2 years, that has happened on personal levels, that have happened through business, that has happened through us being a job seeker, through other people who we've interviewed who have been on the job seeker side and providing feedback. But this is a consistent message that we've heard about these frustrations. Again, let me reiterate that. I'm not getting a response to applications they put in, for even though they're highly qualified. The second issue is, even if they do get a response, it tends to be an AI automated type of messaging that doesn't really progress them through the process, typically in the form of a rejection. Or if they do make it to either a phone screen or interview, that more often than not that they're just getting ghosted in the process. So if anybody out there who's listening right now has had anything like this experience,
you are not alone.
You are not alone.
So
it's true.
The employer side is really complaining that there's, not enough candidates on the market. They're not qualified. The people that are out there, they are...
Why aren't they interested?
Yeah.
Why aren't there interested people in this job?
And that's consistently. I work with a lot of hiring managers for different companies with roles that we're trying to fill, and we're bringing them qualified candidates, but we go through a lot.
And the same ghosting comment is coming from the employers too, right? I mean, we certainly, as an employer, have experienced quite a few candidates in our process ghost us. I think what's tricky about this is, like, it's kind of like the whole chicken or the egg.
Yeah, which came first? Whose fault is it?
Is both sides reactive to having been treated that way? And they go, well, if employers can ghost me, then I can ghost them too. Do you know what I mean?
They keep saying we're not seeing, the message I keep hearing loud and clear, we're not seeing the quality candidates. We're just not seeing the quality candidates.
Right. And so here's the question. The question, and also maybe a rhetorical question. Both of these things, guys, cannot happen simultaneously, without explanation, without a reason. And literally over at least the last couple of years, this has been a regular, ongoing, frequent conversation that I've been having, with my business partners, with colleagues, with other professionals, with job seekers, with family, with friends. This has been an ongoing piece of feedback. It is not possible for both of these things, both of these very, very similar frustrations, to be happening simultaneously. Not to mention, right now, in an unemployment market, that the percentage of unemployed people is basically just accounting for people who choose not to work. It's accounting for people who are choosing to maybe be like a stay-at-home parent, or doing, taking an intentional leave of absence, or maybe going through a career change. The unemployment market, it's good. Like, it's in this, when you look at the same 5 to 7 year time frame, there clearly has been jobs out there. And I think that's part of the frustration for job seekers too, is they're like, what the heck? How is there so many jobs listed here, and yet I'm not getting any activity from the applications that I'm putting in? Now, I will tell you, looking for a job doesn't start and end with applying. Like, you got to put in some work. We know this because, again, that's how we obtain new contracts in our business, is to apply for recruiting jobs, right? And we have to do a massive effort in regards to follow up on those applications. We have to do a massive amount of work in terms of networking and like reaching out and being very active.
The message I'm trying to deliver to my 16-year-old daughter who's been applying for jobs. She's like, I just applied and, like, they never called. And she assumes it's because they looked at her resume and they don't like her. And I'm like, no, honey, they didn't look at your resume. You need to call.
You don't exist.
You have to call.
You
have to
exist.
call. You have to follow up. You have to let them know who you are and be aggressive. Unfortunately, otherwise you don't exist, like you said.
So, again, just kind of bringing it back in to say, these two things, the feedback and the experience of the job seeker and the feedback and the experience of the employer, if we just talk reality, can actually happen simultaneously without there being some cause of it, without there being something causing this situation to occur. And I think that most job seekers go, hey, it's a simple point A to point B situation, right? Like, I'm a job seeker, look for a job, you have a job, and boom, that's it. But there's something in the middle there, guys. There's a middle person, a middle profession that exists between the job seeker and the employer and the employer and the job seeker. And that's what we call recruiting. That is the middle stage. Now, for those of you that don't know, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, recruiting traditionally has existed, since the beginning of time, basically in 3 different forms. And I would say the OG recruiting was really like old school. I like to refer to as the dinosaur of recruiting, which is staffing agencies. Then over time, there would be recruiting became a part of human resources in organizations and had a very, very specific function in terms of hey, we're going to carve out hiring for our business, and it was called recruiting. And then you had corporate recruiting, and then contract recruiting was something I would say that came along later on, when it was like, we need help and support and additional resources for our hiring efforts, but we don't need like a permanent person full time forever. And so contract recruiting was probably, of the 3 traditional methodologies, the more recent, form. Now, the problem is that there are many, many gaps in these 3 traditional methodologies that just kind of don't get addressed and they don't get handled. And after spending 12 years in corporate recruiting myself and in corporate HR, that is really what motivated me when I went out on my own. I spent about 2 years as a contract recruiter who was investigating what is the needs of any type of business in any industry, in any size, any location. There has to be some common factors here, and in alignment with these gaps, like what are the missing pieces that were there in the traditional 3 methods. And that's ultimately what led to the invention of our methodology of recruiting that's called flex recruiting, a standalone, to be clear, not to be compared to one of the 3 traditional methodologies. It is its own methodology of recruiting that we have named flex recruiting. Flex is not an adjective, it's a name.
Yeah.
So to be clear. But that's what really pushed us towards that. And I got to tell you, this methodology is not like magical. There's nothing like really crazy special about what we're doing. It is really a focus and a dedication to consistent best practices around full life cycle recruiting. All of the pieces and all the nitty gritty. Because guys, there's a lot of steps here that like most people, if you haven't spent any time in this industry or in this profession, you guys as a job seeker, you don't even see. People who have businesses that like hire recruiters or who have recruiters that work for them, they don't even see it. They don't even know it. This is a true profession that there are very specific steps and stages and processes that exist that does define what full life cycle recruiting is. And in my time coming up, in recruiting, this was something I would say that these fundamental pieces of the full life cycle process was something that was consistently followed and expected. And it's really what differentiated between a good recruiter, an okay recruiter, and a pretty terrible one, and you could kind of reference those best practices and the processes to identify, how solid is someone. Now, a lot of my recruiting background actually was very much tied to sales. And so when you're doing what we call high volume recruiting or sales recruiting, there is a ton of tie-in and crossover. So that ends up becoming very like production focused, and it's a little bit less like best practice and process focused than it would be with like non-sales or non-high volume production. But even in those, even when it comes to that, you still have steps to follow.
Yeah.
And
including not ghosting candidates, things like that.
Yes. And for part 2 of this, where we're actually going to cite examples of evidence.
Data that we've collected.
I'm doing a lot of quotes today. Can you edit out all my hand quotes? Like my hands will just disappear like this, but I'm going to try to control my quotes today.
Examples.
Yeah, it's a lot of air quoting that I'm doing today. But
we have data. Now I'm going to mock you. Sorry.
Where does this evidence come from? It comes from us. Here we are. We, as a business, we have our parent company, which is Winshire Group, but we have 3 businesses. Our services business, AIS, that houses our flex recruiting services business. And we have spent the last 2 years attempting to hire experienced recruiters, have them come in, we train them up on our flex recruiting methodology, which again is not anything crazy or magical. It is a dedication, an absolute discipline, a strict, high accountability discipline to maintaining high standards and best practices to kind of like the OG full life cycle recruiting process.
It's quality, it's detail oriented, it's organized, and it's how we keep our head on straight and we've got tools in place to make sure that we can take each candidate for each role that we're recruiting for through a quality process beginning to end without ghosting them, even if they're rejected.
And tons of TLC to the hiring managers.
Lots of TLC to the hiring managers.
Engagement into the business and making sure that we're in constant alignment with what the business needs are.
So we have, as Angela said, been trying to hire experienced recruiters, period, that we've tried to bring onto our team. And when I say experienced recruiters, they weren't necessarily recruiting back in 1942 when you started, but I'm just kidding. No, they weren't. Maybe they're experienced within the past 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
Whereas we have many more years than that combined between me and Melissa, close to 50 years. So, we are hiring them on because they've got the experience in recruiting. We're assuming they've got the experience in recruiting in a quality way. And then we try to have them adopt our methodology. And we've been trying that for a couple years with a few different people. And now I want to die.
It's okay. And so let's talk about, what do we mean by that? What do I mean by recruiting is causing this? I gotta breathe a little bit and swallow a little bit because it's a hard pill to swallow, guys, you know, to admit this, to confess this. And I gotta tell you, I'm fully prepared for once this video goes public, and once it starts to get out there, that there's probably gonna be a lot of upset recruiters. They are not going to, they're either one, going to be in full denial of what is in essence an accusation, right, that's being made here, and that it's being made on such a broad scale about all of recruiting across the board. We can speak on a global scale because we do handle global recruitment, but we'll specifically, in the context of this video, be talking about what's happening in the US. Part of working towards getting past this and improving something that is so huge and something so substantial, like a job market. Jobs that make money for people to be able to support their lives and their families, right? This is not small. And to be honest, part of my desire to get out there and make this public is I'm kind of like tired of all the conversation about this. Like all the theories, all the hypothesizing about what could be going on, like all these things that people are like, we think it's because of the economy. FYI, guys, it kind of works the other way around. Also, like job market is what has a bigger impact on the economy than the other way around. And so there's just so many theories out there, none of which I've heard to be so direct and so pointed at saying it is the recruiting industry as a whole. Also,
I'm sitting here thinking to myself, we discussed a lot around this topic, you and I off camera, and we have figured out what the problem is. And I'm like, so what's going to be the solution? And hopefully part of the solution will be people seeing this that are in recruiting or are in HR and going, crap, I am doing that. Like, I'm doing that. I'm creating a bottleneck.
It's a hope, but that's a stretch.
Because it's got to change.
Listen, guys, there are very real personality types that tend to be attracted towards certain professions. And most recruiters that end up staying in recruiting for the long term are people who like to be autonomous in terms of their time, their schedule, their decision making, how they do things. They tend to be a lot of type A personalities that are out there as well. So with those personality types, it is often a lot of self-convincing that they're not a part of the problem, that like what they're doing isn't wrong, that they are trying their best, that they're doing their best, that they're giving their best. And by the way, that might be true.
And they're going, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Hiring Manager. I know the candidates suck. And then they're going to the candidates. I'm sorry. The hiring manager just, I don't know.
Yeah. And it's, so again, that's a very optimistic view, and I'm with you. I hope that this accusation might bring to light with a lot of recruiters in all methodologies to maybe do some self-reflection and go, oh no, am I actually the problem? Have I been a contributor to the disaster that the job market is and has been for several years? And be honest enough and self-reflect enough to implement immediate action to change and to do better and to be better and to stop doing what I have now been referring to for nearly 2 years as putting on the show.
And I'm seeing a lot of recruiters too, in just trying to hire them. I'm seeing a lot of them that are hopping from job to job. And I think it's because as soon as they're not able to put on the show anymore, they move on.
The show refers to knowing enough and having enough experience in the recruiting industry, having enough knowledge of what the expectations of candidates and of hiring managers are, mostly the hiring managers, to be clear. Knowing the steps to the full life cycle recruiting process well enough to know what is it that I need to show I'm doing to give the impression that I'm actually performing all of the steps necessary. Mind you, in the full life cycle recruiting process, 80% of this process is heavy administrative. We've had recent people refer to it as admin stuff.
Yeah.
There are, not that I'm going to sit here and try to bore you with this level of detail, but I would say there's probably 12 solid steps. You know, if you were to break it up.
It's a lot of admin.
Right, it's a lot of admin stuff.
It's a lot of admin
and
stuff.
of those 12 steps, probably 8 of them are admin. But the truth of the matter is, in the show, when a recruiter's putting on the show, what they've learned how to do is
they're just talking.
They are right.
Just
they are
no,
not candidates. They are really becoming like fancy resume pushers.
Yeah.
Right. It like boils down to being fancy resume pushers. And what do I mean by that? In 2 years of looking at this carefully, of having conversations with so many people, of seeing the work that's being done by recruiters, they are maybe screening 10% of applicants coming in. Maybe.
Chances are, if you're applying to a job, no one's seeing your resume.
And when I say, and by the way, OG days in terms of original full life cycle recruiting, the expectation was that every single applicant that came in was supposed to be looked at. We call it screening, but it was supposed to be, every single applicant was supposed to be looked at and qualified. Do you meet the bare minimum qualifications for this role? If you do not, you're not qualified and you disqualify them in the system. Disposition is what we call them. And if you are qualified, then we would move them on to the next stage in the process, which is an invitation to be a part of a recruiter phone screen. Now, technology's come into play into all of this, and there are people and recruiters and companies that have chosen to engage in various forms of AI, whether that's through like a follow-up questionnaire that will come up, or a video interview.
One-way video interviews, which are my favorite.
Or even worse, some sort of weird assessment, But there is definitely parts of it. But the bottom line was, the expectation was every single applicant that came through was supposed to be looked at. And this was part of how you were evaluated as a recruiter. If I, as a corporate recruiter, didn't look at every single applicant that came in, my leadership would clearly see that, and they would be like, what's going on, Angela? Why are there, we have 600 applicants sitting in here and 300 of them haven't even been looked at yet. And oh, by the way, these 300 applicants weren't just from like last week. These are like 2-3 weeks or a month old. And I knew that. So to me, it was like, okay, this is something I'm evaluated on. This is something judging my performance as a recruiter. This is an important aspect of what I'm doing here. The other critical part of recruiting was sourcing, meaning reaching out, looking for passive candidates, whether it was through, typically nowadays it's exclusively profiles on like job boards, whether it's Indeed, LinkedIn, what have you, and sourcing. And sourcing was also a substantial part of how a recruiter was supposed to spend their time. From that first initial step, right, in terms of activity, but there's also a lot of work that happens before that, right?
Yeah.
The show of recruiting is doing just the pieces that can send like a message to the hiring managers in particular, to the talent leadership, that things are getting done.
Yeah.
I'm over here. I know I'm working from home, but I'm working.
Which I don't know how they're getting away with that, because we are contract recruiters, and I feel the pressure to make sure that every applicant in the ATSs that I'm working in are screened, because the clients are looking.
So there are strategies. Again, like once you really get good at this maneuvering that's happening, you know that you can like go into an applicant tracking system, which is the system that receives all the applicants that come in, and you can have auto reply. So it'll
automatically mark them as reviewed.
Because they'll set a filtration criteria. So I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of things in technology.
I haven't even looked at it.
And by the way, I really think that recruiters feel justified in this because they feel like their time is being saved. But recruiting is a part of human resources for a reason, because it requires human beings to participate in the process of hiring human beings.
They're spending a lot of time trying to
you're not going to
avoid doing the work and make it look like they're doing the work. That's the show.
When robots start taking over jobs, which we all know is coming, it's not some weird sci-fi thing we're talking about anymore. Humans are not going to be participating in the hiring process of robots. Okay? Humans are going to participate in the process of hiring humans. And there is only so much you can justify as a recruiter to still be a strong, quality recruiter and justify by automating every single freaking thing that you do.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if all this automation that recruiters are choosing, they don't have to do it, by the way. They can still choose whether it's them, whether it's somebody who's like in a sourcing position, that is the ones that are there to actually look at every single applicant. It can be done. The reason I know it can be done is because we do it. That's what we do. To this day, we're still old school in regards to this. We still screen every single applicant that comes through. Every single one of them. And so when we know that this is possible, we also acknowledge that it's a choice to not do it. And what instead a recruiter who's putting on the show will do is they will utilize every form of automation that they can to limit the amount of actual work that they have to do. Their engagement with candidates is little to non-existent in terms of communicating updates, communicating what's going on. This is where the ghosting piece of it comes into play. They will avoid interactions with hiring managers in terms of actual weekly update meetings. Things will be deduced down to reports. They'll be deduced down to, an email instead of like an actual face-to-face interaction, even if it's over a video. And they will be prepared with a substantial amount of excuses as to why there isn't more traffic coming in. The traffic's there. They're just not participating in being a functional filter that they should be, and spending that time screening candidates, spending the time phone screening, guys, real life phone screening or video screening qualified candidates who you should first perform that screen with before you put their information together and then submit them to a hiring manager. Most of the time, recruiters these days are just resume pushers.
How are you going to push a resume to a hiring manager or recommend a candidate that you haven't even heard their voice? You don't even know if they can speak professionally.
But it's not even about their voice. Like, you don't even know if they're still interested. We're going to, in part 2, share with you all the evidence backing this very real accusation of the entire traditional recruiting industry. And what we see happening firsthand with hundreds of examples, and how we know that this is happening. And again, I get it. There's going to definitely be some upset recruiters out there who are like, this isn't true. We're not to blame. Here's the list of things that we think. These are our theories about what's to blame. But the real question is, will any of those same recruiters take a moment to self-reflect and ask themselves, have I in fact been putting on the show? Have I looked for opportunities, whether it's through automation, through technology, through excuses, through focusing on low-hanging fruit, through only looking at 10% of applicants coming in, through spending little to no time, whether it's you or somebody you hire and pay to participate in the process of sourcing passive candidates or screening applicants coming in. Are you doing those things? Or maybe you're only doing 20% show, 30% show. Maybe you've worked all your way up to 100% show. But I wonder how many recruiters, before they get upset to hear this accusation, will actually self-reflect. This mess of a job market must be resolved. It has to be addressed. And it's going to require change. It's going to require improvement and commitment to consistency of practices and doing the work. It's going to require those things. And if that doesn't happen across the board in all forms of recruiting, in all forms of the individual recruiters actually doing the work, if it doesn't happen, this job market disaster will continue.
Yep.
And the thing of it is, guys, let me tell you something. If you yourself are not a recruiter that's watching this right now, I guarantee you know somebody that's either a close friend or family or some kind of meaningful connection to somebody who is. There's a lot of recruiters out there, guys. A lot of recruiters. And I encourage you to ask about this. I encourage you to take this part 1 and part 2 and go, listen, there's kind of been a revealing, the curtain's been pulled back here. Is this what's going on? Is this what you're doing? And again, I would venture to say that most recruiters are probably going to be in denial that they're putting on the show or participating in any way, shape, or form. But guys, this isn't a one-person problem. This isn't a 1% problem. This isn't even like a 50% problem. This is, I would say, based on the data, the knowledge, the experience, collectively of 50 years of expertise here between myself and Kristen and Melissa. In addition to that, 2 years of a focus in this area and collecting this data. This is a 70 to 80% problem, if not more.
It's definitely an industry-wide problem, and I hope that a lot of people do what you're asking, which is go ahead and ask people that you know that are recruiters, are you looking at all the applicants to kind of validate what we're saying? Mm-hmm. Hopefully they'll tell you the truth.
Or ask them to define what looking at screening applicants means to them.
Yeah.
Right? Is it something that they've set up with some sort of automation? Or are they actually themselves or somebody that will be on the team whose specific purpose is to screen and source? Are they consistently doing it and looking at every single applicant?
But trust us, it's not political. It's not the job market. It's not, what? And what else
Again,
is being blamed?
there's a lot of theory, a lot of the whole back for part 2, where we will get into the evidence behind why the recruiting industry is to blame for the disaster that is the job market today. Have a great rest of your day. Don't forget to like and subscribe and do all the things, and make sure you follow us for future videos.